Just because you're getting on doesn't mean that you should give up on life and on travelling in particular. There's still plenty of places out there to see. And in this series of specials, we're going to be looking at 7 places that we've been to that we think are still really worth a visit. Welcome to Grey Matters. Welcome to Grey Matters, the channel that promotes the fact that the older generation still matters and looks at issues that matter to the older generation. Well, in our last video we took you to New Zealand, and it's a long journey, one that requires a stopover. In our case it was Hong Kong on the way out and Beijing on the way home. Well, it doesn't seem a lot of point in going all that way and then just sitting on the runway ready to take off again later. So we extended our trip by a few days at each end so we could take in those amazing cities. In Hong Kong, we booked a city centre hotel. It wasn't that expensive, and our room was large and well appointed. Hong Kong is famed for its nightly laser show at the harbour, but due to low cloud, we didn't get the full effect. Instead, it looked a little alien. Independence Day came to mind as the lasers danced around behind the clouds. The night market is something that's not to be missed. Whether or not you want to eat there depends on your sensibilities and constitution. Don't confuse the food you get in China with Chinese food in the UK. In many cases we found the menus confusing and the food unrecognisable. If you're a vegetarian, you might struggle to find something to eat. Unlike Chinese food in the UK, Chinese food in China is seldom vegetarian, and with dishes titled things like odd flavoured chicken, it could be an adventure for sure. But I'll tell you more about the food when we cover Beijing later in the video. Be sure to take a trip on the Star Ferry. It's quite a famous passenger ferry service and a tourist attraction. Its principal routes carry passengers across the Victoria Harbour between Hong Kong Island and Kowloon. It's been running since 1888 and it's a great ride used by commuters and tourists alike. Lantau Island is the largest island in Hong Kong, and it's also home to the Tiananmen Buddha, a large bronze statue of Buddha Shakyamuni. It's near the Po Lin Monastery. We visited there when there was low cloud again, which made everything look eerie and otherworldly. The highest point of Hong Kong is Victoria Peak, reached by an impressive funicular railway. At the top are the public gardens, a restaurant and some fantastic views across the city. And finally, there's Kowloon Park, an oasis of calm in the centre of this manic city. Artists, flamingos, Tai Chi, and fan dancing are all part of the charm. Well, after Hong Kong, we carried on to New Zealand, and on the way back from New Zealand, we stopped off in Beijing. Now, we arrived there around 6 o'clock in the morning and were met by our driver, who spoke no English, but still managed to get us to our B&B in the Mao Hutong. Now, a hutong is a small alley, and there are hundreds of them in Beijing. They all look the same, so it's all very easy to get lost. We arrived at the B&B around 7 a.m. Big red doors in a shabby looking hutong did not fill us with confidence, but my goodness, when the doors opened, we were presented with an utterly gorgeous house. We were greeted by Angela, who very proudly showed us her TripAdvisor award and who then gave us breakfast. Now, I don't know about you, but my experience of B&Bs in the UK, if you were to turn up there 7 or 8 hours early to check in, you'd be shown the door, not given a free breakfast. Since our visit in 2012, it appears to have had some major upgrades. I'm guessing it's been taken over, and it's now called the, and I need to look this up, the Beijing Rong Courtyard Boutique Hotel. I can't speak for it now personally, but judging by the online reviews, it's still a really good place to stay, so I'll leave a link in the comments down below. Well, we wasted no time getting out and about. We headed straight into the centre of Beijing and went to visit the Forbidden City. It is vast, a former royal palace covering 720,000 square metres. It's nearly 600 years old, and it got its name because it was forbidden for common people to enter. It's certainly impressive size-wise, but that's about all there is to it. A large number of decorated buildings to which there is no access, and which appear to be largely unfurnished, and hard landscaping and miles of concrete. It makes it quite a harsh and uninviting environment, but it's still worth seeing. The Summer Palace, however, is a must-see destination and is in stark contrast to the Forbidden City. There are acres of gardens and woodlands, a huge lake, pagodas and other beautifully preserved structures. Hands down, the best place to visit if your time in Beijing is limited. Now, I mentioned the food earlier in the video, and if this is your first trip to China, then you're going to be in for a bit of a shock. For a start, none of the animal is wasted. So be prepared for things like boiled duck's feet, half a duck's head, complete with beak, a la Peking duck, or how about a pig's face flattened out on your plate, snout sticking upwards, and a nice little flower in the nostril. The Chinese are not big on vegetarianism, that's for sure. And my wife, who is a vegetarian, found it quite difficult to find anything to eat. And in fact, most nights ended up at Mackie D's with a fillet of fish and fries. This is as near as they got to creating a veggie dish in a rather posh restaurant. It looks pretty, but basically it's just a pile of sliced cucumber dressed with some tomatoes. No visit to Beijing would be complete without a trip to the Great Wall. There are 10 locations where you can access this 6,000 kilometre long structure, but here's a tip for you. Avoid accessing it at Badaling. This is where most of the organised tours go, and it can be very crowded. Angela at our B&B arranged for a driver to take us to Mutianyu, which generally has far fewer tourists, and it also has the best restored sections of the wall. When you arrive, you'll find that the wall sits high above you and has to be accessed by a chairlift. When you've finished your look around, you could elect to return to the bottom on a crazy toboggan run if you fancied that. We didn't. The scale and enormity of the wall is breathtaking, but it's also far from level. Whichever direction you choose to walk, it will be uphill, and even coming back downhill, it can play havoc with your calves and knees, especially if your fitness is lacking. But even so, don't let that put you off. There are guides to assist you, and the views are really worth the slog. Take some warm clothing, because even when it's sunny at the base, there can be a cold wind blowing across the mountains. And finally, there's Tiananmen Square, scene of the student protests in 1989, and made infamous by this amazing picture. The square is a vast concrete political statement. You'll see a number of fire extinguishers strategically placed around the area. It is still a site for protests, and apparently is not unknown for lone protesters to set themselves on fire. Despite its darker side and recent communist roots, the city has a rich history and is well worth a visit. It's really not possible for me to say which I preferred more, Beijing or Hong Kong. They're so vastly different. And Hong Kong is definitely more affluent. Beijing has a more austere feel about it. The people are poorer for sure, and I suspect there's a lot more poverty there. But both are very welcoming to tourists, and there are some very different experiences to try. So have you been to either of those destinations? If you have, then please leave a comment down below. Tell us about your experiences. We do love to hear from other people about what they found to see and do, and their views on the places that we've been to. Also, if you can, share the video, give it a like, because those do really help the channel to grow and our videos to reach more people. And that would be really great. Thank you very much. So that's it for this time. In the next video, we're going to be going to Romania and a bit of the old Count Dracula of Transylvania. Can't wait for that. See you next time. Bye for now.